Love à la carte. Michelle clutched her tablet, knuckles white, as she stood before the gleaming kitchen of the Le Petit Gourmet cooking school. What on earth had possessed her to sign up for this class? She could barely boil water without setting off the smoke alarm in her tiny apartment. Her best friend's words echoed in her mind, "You need to get out more, live a little. Besides, everyone loves a woman who can cook." So here she was, surrounded by sleek appliances and fellow students who all seemed far more at ease than she felt. The instructor, a tall man with a neatly trimmed beard and a sprinkle in his eyes, clapped his hands for attention. "Welcome, everyone, to French Cuisine for Beginners. I'm Chef Antoine, and over the next 8 weeks, we'll explore the delights of French cooking together. Let's start with introductions, shall we?" Michelle's heart raced as the others began to speak. There was a bubbly college student, a retired couple, a young man who worked in finance, and several others. When it was her turn, Michelle managed to squeak out her name in a mumbled, "I'm here to learn the basics," before quickly looking back down at her tablet. As she did, she noticed someone entering the kitchen late. A man, probably in his early 30s like her, hurried in with an apologetic smile. He had unruly brown hair and wore a wrinkled button-down shirt that looked like it had been hastily tucked in. "So sorry I'm late," he said, slightly out of breath. "Got caught up at work. I'm Max." Chef Antoine nodded. "No worries, Max. Grab an apron and join us. We were just doing introductions." Max grabbed a blue apron from a hook and ended up standing right next to Michelle. He flashed her a warm smile as he struggled to tie the apron strings behind his back. Without thinking, Michelle reached out to help him. "Thanks," he whispered, his green eyes crinkling at the corners. "I'm usually better with my hands, I promise." Michelle felt a blush creeping up her cheeks. "No problem," she murmured, quickly turning her attention back to Chef Antoine, who was now explaining the basics of knife skills. As the weeks progressed, Michelle found herself looking forward to the classes more and more. She was still a disaster in the kitchen. Her first attempt at French onion soup had been more charcoal than onion, but she was improving. And if she was honest with herself, a large part of her newfound enthusiasm had to do with Max. They'd fallen into an easy rapport, laughing at each other's culinary mishaps and celebrating the small victories. Michelle learned that Max was a pediatrician who'd signed up for the class on a whim after a particularly tough week at the hospital. "I figured learning to cook might be less stressful than dealing with sick kids all day," he joked. "I'm not sure I was right about that." By the 4th class, they'd taken to arriving early to chat over coffee before the lesson began. Michelle found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone, her dreams of writing a novel, her fears of never finding her place in the world. Max listened with genuine interest, offering encouragement and sharing his own insecurities about his career and life choices. During the 5th class, as they worked side by side on a delicate béarnaise sauce, their hands brushed. Michelle felt a jolt of electricity at the contact, and when she looked up, she saw a flicker of something in Max's eyes that made her heart skip a beat. But just as she was about to say something, what, she wasn't sure, disaster struck. Her sauce separated, turning into an oily mess. In her fluster to fix it, she knocked over Max's perfectly executed sauce, sending it cascading across the counter. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," Michelle exclaimed, mortified. She grabbed for paper towels, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. But Max just laughed. "Hey, no worries. Now we're even. Remember when I spilled that entire bowl of cream on you last week?" His easy forgiveness and warm smile made something melt inside Michelle. She found herself laughing too, the tension dissipating as they cleaned up the mess together. As the course neared its end, Michelle realized with a start that she'd missed these evenings more than she'd expected. Not just the cooking, though she had to admit she'd come to enjoy even that, but the time spent with Max. They would never have met if not for the class, and she wasn't sure if their easy friendship would translate to the real world. The final class was a challenge. Each student had to prepare a classic French dish of their choice to present to the group. Michelle opted for coq au vin, while Max decided to tackle a notoriously difficult chocolate soufflé. As they cooked, the kitchen was filled with a nervous energy. Everyone wanted to impress Chef Antoine and their fellow students with their newfound skills. Michelle found her hands shaking slightly as she worked, and she noticed Max checking his souffle obsessively. When it came time to present, Michelle was pleasantly surprised by how her dish turned out. The chicken was tender, the sauce rich and flavorful. She received warm compliments from the group, and even Chef Antoine nodded approvingly. Then it was Max's turn. He brought out his souffle with a flourish, and everyone leaned in eagerly. But as he set it down, the delicate confection began to sink, deflating before their eyes. Max's face fell, and Michelle felt her heart ache for him. Without thinking, she stepped forward and dipped a spoon into the collapsed souffle. She said, closing her eyes in genuine pleasure. It may not look perfect, but it tastes divine. The tension broke, and soon everyone was sampling Max's creation, agreeing that looks weren't everything. As the class wound down and people began to say their goodbyes, Michelle felt a tap on her shoulder. "Hey," Max said, looking slightly nervous. "I was wondering, would you like to get dinner sometime?" Michelle's heart soared. "I'd love to," she replied, unable to keep the smile off her face. As they exchanged numbers and made plans, Michelle marveled at how much had changed in just 8 weeks. She'd come to learn how to cook, but she'd gained so much more. Confidence, new friends, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something wonderful with Max. Later that night, as Michelle fell asleep, she found herself dreaming not of perfectly executed French dishes, but of shared laughter over kitchen mishaps, deep conversations over coffee, and the warm light in Max's eyes when he looked at her. Sometimes, the best recipes in life are the ones we create ourselves, with a pinch of courage, a dash of serendipity, and a generous helping of openness to new experiences. In the morning, she woke to a text from Max. "Dinner this weekend? I promise not to cook." Michelle laughed, her heart light. Whatever came next, she knew one thing for certain. Life was about to get a lot more flavorful.